Well, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. We are very happy to have you with us today. We're going to give people a few minutes to join in the meeting before we kick it off. So while we're waiting, why don't you all put into the chat where it is you're joining us from so we can see, who came the furthest. I'll get you started with my location. Got Bend, Oregon, chilly still. It's always chilly in Bend, Oregon. Seth's from Maine, Phil's from Portland. We got a quiet room today. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's community conversation. My name is Chris, and I'll be your community host today. We are joined today by the one and only Phil Eichmiller from the Fusion 360 team, and he is going to take all of your questions about Fusion 360 today. So just a little bit about this community conversation series in case you're joining us for the first time. Community conversations is our way of bringing expert speakers from the community together with you to talk about a variety of different topics like tips and tricks and workflows and question and answer sessions like we're doing today. And they're always hosted by us in the community. One of your community managers is always here to steer the conversation and help things move along nicely. So we're glad to have you here with us today. Our safe harbor statement, we always put this up at the beginning of each of these because you never know what somebody's going to want to talk about. And there may be forward-looking statements that are made during these sessions. We want you to know that whatever is said in here, please make any and all purchasing decisions based on the state that the software is in today, not based on anything that you might hear in today's session. So before we get started, I just want to let everybody know your line is muted to reduce background noise, but we invite you to turn your camera on if you would like to. And if you want to join in the conversation, because that's what this is, please use the raise hand or type your question in the chat, and we'll be keeping an eye on that throughout today's meeting. The session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be made available after this is completed. So with that, let's introduce everybody who's here today. My name is Chris. I'm the community manager for design and manufacturing, and former expert elite, former customer, AU speaker. I've been around the block a few times. Just getting started though with Fusion 360. I'm sorry to say my background is all in Inventor, so don't beat me up too bad for that. Sean, you want to tell everybody who you are?
I am Sean Hurley. I'm an Autodesk Community Engagement Manager, longtime Autodesker, recovering mechanical designer, former Portland resident. Now in Bend, Oregon, just about 3 hours southeast of Phil. Go ahead, Phil.
Take it, Phil.
Hi there. I'm Phil Eichmiller, and you might see me on the community forum for Fusion 360 answering questions on the support page. I also work as a quality assurance engineer. I'm coming up on 10 years working on Fusion and working for Autodesk. Prior to that, I was an Inventor user from the R1 days forward, used Inventor in industry, and I also teach at Portland Community College. I've been teaching there for nearly 15 years now. Inventor and more recently Fusion 360, establishing a curriculum for Fusion at Portland Community College.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to turn the screen off here and let you take it from this point forward, Phil.
All right. Well, everybody, welcome. I'm here to answer some questions. I am primarily a modeling expert. So anything in the modeling domain or drawings. I'm pretty good with renderings. I can find my way around simulations if I have to. CAM stuff is, I know what that workspace looks like. But if there's CAM questions, I'm going to lean on my good buddy Seth Midori, who's sitting there in the gallery. Hopefully he can handle anything that pops up along those lines if you have them. Thank you, Seth, for joining as well. So with that said, anybody, if you've got a question, please go ahead and pop it into the chat. And I've got Fusion open. I've got a model open in case we need to demonstrate any of these concepts that we're talking about.
Everybody's going to be really shy, I'm sure.
Yeah, nobody wants to be the first one to say something.
Oh, come on in. It's all right. This is the best community conversation you're going to have today. So
You got a
That's
bunch
a
of
fact.
bearded old guys.
yeah, yeah. And I promise I'll be friendlier in person.
Oh, come
Patrick,
on.
no questions?
Let's see, has anything popped into the chat yet?
No, everybody's been really shy.
All right. Well, here, let me share screen for a second and maybe get some juices flowing here. So here's my Fusion concept desk lamp that I never quite finished. The idea was to put some LEDs in these two spots right here. But what I wanted to bring your attention to is that we just had a major update yesterday. So the March 29th major update is in the books, and you know what build you're on by going to the help menu and clicking about. And so you can see that 2.0.12665 is the latest production build right now. And if you don't have that yet and you've started Fusion, look and see if there's and I'm showing you on my Fusion application right here. Hopefully you can see that there's the job status clock right here. If there's a little one next to it, you can click on it and it'll pop open and show you if there's an update streaming in, and it'll tell you when you can press to restart and get actually start with that update. Once you do that, you can go over here to the help menu again and go down to the what's new. And when you start the what's new, what you'll be taken to is Kaching's product update what's new blog. And this is always an informative read. I think it's really critical. I think everybody should, when you're using Fusion, take just a few minutes, drink a cup of coffee or tea or whatever your favorite beverage is, and go over here and just scroll through the what's new, just to see what's going on. So big news, we're replacing cloud credits with flex tokens. So that's a new system there. I'm sure we'd love to hear your feedback about it. This next item has been a long time coming. So you can repair issues in Fusion 360 without uninstalling it. So I think a major habit that people have learned in recent times, using their phones and other devices, especially Apple devices, is that uninstall is usually really easy. For traditional Windows users, we get into these really monolithic CAD programs and we're trying to uninstalling, something like Inventor is not a trivial task. And so it's not something that people tend to do unless they absolutely have to. But with Fusion, there's this sort of different mindset where it's like, hey, let's just, it's like an app, right? I could just drag this into the garbage can and try again. Well, this utility here is to kind of avoid that, right? Because Fusion really it really isn't like an app you could just drag to the garbage can. There's actually a lot more going on there. And so we've had things like a clean uninstall tool, and it just sort of seems silly to have an uninstall tool and then a clean uninstall tool or process. It's like you don't need 2 uninstalls. So we've kind of tried to wrap up all of those concerns, and we built out this service utility menu. The service utility itself, actually, I should say. And on the menu there, you can see you got a number of items. Number 1 is contact support. If you have a commercial license, please just contact support if you need it. But there's repairing a Fusion, reset Fusion, and uninstall Fusion. And if for some reason your network is giving you trouble and Fusion won't go online, there's also a network diagnostic test and so forth. So there's some cool tools in there, hopefully help you get what you need from Fusion. If for any reason that you feel like it needs to be it needs to get a little kick to run properly. Sometimes surprising things happen. Windows and Mac have both released security updates in the last year that have broken Fusion things. So just an example, the kind of thing that can happen that's out of our control. So you do end up in this situation. So that's a good tool now.
We did get one question, a couple of questions now here for you in the chat.
Oh, good. What do we got?
From Stephen. The first question was, why is there an objects to cut option, but no objects to join option when carrying out a modeling operation that passes through other objects?
That's a good question. traditionally it was actually before objects to cut, it was just everything was based on a visibility. Participation was always based on visibility. So for objects to join, if your extrude is passing through several objects and you don't want it to join with one of those objects, you're going to have to continue to use the visibility option and make something invisible in order to not have it participate in a join. But I don't know why there isn't. I think this has been proposed, and it just hasn't been taken up as a major customer request. So there's, we're putting out thousands of customer fixes every year, and this just hasn't made it to the list, I guess. Yep. Good question.
Stephen also has a feedback comment on the Flex tokens. As a small business user of Fusion 360, I am not that impressed by the Flex token change. The minimum purchase quantity is too large. I've heard that comment before. And the fact that they expire after 12 months really sucks. It seems like it's been set up around large corporate users. Any comments or?
Yeah, so Stephen, you're in the UK, and I do know that for some reason they rolled out the Flex token model as having what I think admittedly too large of a minimum purchase outside of the US, and I know that they're working to address that, but I really can't speak to that business plan at all, other than the things that I've heard. But I do know that outside the US, they are concerned that something about the way it worked rolled up into way too big of a minimum purchase. So I think what they're trying to do is get it down to, what it is in the US, which is something like, something less than whatever you're saying. I can't even say numbers. I don't know them. Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't, I'm a modeling guy. So, I hear what you're saying, and I tend to agree. If it's flexible, it should be more flexible, right? The word flex is in the name. So, please definitely, send feedback. I think there is something in the Flex, something in this what's new. Maybe one of these things might lead to a place where you can give us some feedback about it.
Not a bad idea. And that's it for what's in the chat at the moment.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have better answers for anyone right now. Let's see. I'm still sharing, right?
Yes.
All right. So let's see. One of the things I'm really stoked about is the plastics design tools and the design advice. One of the things that I noticed a long time ago with sheet metal design is that sheet metal design is always based around fabrication and fabrication rules. So you can't really make sheet metal parts without knowing the gauge of steel you're using. So and that gauge of steel also, determines like maybe the machines you're using. And there's a whole bunch of things about sheet metal design that are centered around the fabrication process. But when you go over to plastics design, almost none of it is centered around the fabrication process. So you could have people, and I see this with my students all the time, we'd be working on plastic parts and they'd have, unrealistic thicknesses between the shell and the ribs. They would have ribs that were 0.5 millimeter wide, which is never going to work. Lots of plastics design has for years and years in Inventor and Fusion has allowed you to get to all the way to the part where you're making tooling and a plastics engineer sits and looks at your product and says, you have to redesign the entire thing. And so, bringing that rules-based design pattern to plastics, I think is just incredible, because what you do is you set it up like, instead of picking a sheet metal gauge, you say, I'm using ABS plastic and I have a rule that says all of my ABS parts are 2.5 millimeters thick, or whatever it is, let's say. They have certain bend radiuses, the kind of things that you would associate with sheet metal design all the little things you have to specify are now there for plastics. What it does is it makes the designer a more powerful and efficient designer, because you're not going to create a part like the one you see on the screen and get all the way to the end only to have somebody who's actually going to make the tooling for you say this is impossible to make. I've helped customers over and over with this. Even some of my students have gone off to start their own businesses, and they're like, help. They write me and say, I did this all wrong, and according to this person that's making my tooling. So I think this goes a long way to address that. And so if you do any sort of plastic parts, definitely take a look at this. This bridges the gap between hardcore tooling engineers and the people designing the parts. It should save you time and make you a little more efficient. So let's see. Objects to cut. So Steven says the objects to cut option is an inefficiency when modeling that could be easily remedied by copying the objects to join. There is an Autodesk research survey out there asking how modeling could be made more efficient. Maybe I should just post on there. And 1 second, somebody is phoning me. Wow, that was unexpected. I get a phone call about once a month, and it happened right now. My apologies. Let me just turn this thing off. Make it easy here.
You have won $10 million.
Yeah, maybe. Let's see.
Can we talk about your car warranty?
Yeah, car warranty. That was going to be my next guess. They're tracking you down for your car warranty.
Good grief. Anyway, maybe I should post on there. It's just a small thing, but would be a good improvement. So
I think I've written that the wrong way around, Philip. It's
you meant to say objects to join.
Confusing.
Yeah. No, it's I totally agree with you. I don't know why they would do one and not the other, but I think maybe I don't remember what the UX decisions were at the time.
I get frustrated by having to look through the browser and then hide the visibility of the objects that I don't want to join.
Yeah, it's one of those things I think is too on in the moment for something like a selection set, right? Like if you had to like one of the ways to manage like several components and you want to turn them on and off with visibility very quickly is you could create a selection set, excuse me, and just you would select the selection set and hit the letter V, and visibility toggle kicks in and turns them off. But that's only if you're like you're working down inside of a great big machine and you want to turn off all the outside components. Every day you go to work on this thing, right? What you're talking about is something that's like, it's in the moment. You're like, hey, I'm making this extrude and these things need to join with it or not. And you're never going to have some other tool to help you make that happen. So no, I totally get it. Please do send the feedback in every way you can. I mean, we love hearing from you. I work with the teams that do all the research and collect the feedback, and we talk about these sorts of things. I lend my voice when I can, because I tend to join these groups as a uniquely suited to understand the customer pain, just being a customer and working with customers. So I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, I'm not just on the line to moan though. I've actually used the plastic design tools. So I've actually got a couple of parts here that I've created using those tools, and that's them. So it works really well. The clips work really well.
That's awesome. Are those printed?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Fantastic. Yeah, I'll have
so you can see the clips, and then that one's got the you can see the webs inside it. Sure.
Yeah, it looks nice and sturdy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad you're using that and making use of it. It's the improvements coming down the road for this are going to blow your mind.
Okay.
So yeah, we're just getting started on some of this stuff. So I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say, but I think some of it's out in public. But I see Sean's eyes just got wide.
It's just you could say whatever you want, Phil. We did the safe harbor.
Okay.
But I would try and keep it to the things we've mentioned publicly.
Yeah, and that's my weakness. I'm not real sure what all's out there in public.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's just say that that it'll get easier to do more of the design workflow when it comes to how these things are all kind of put together. Let's put it that way.
That is a great way. And hypotheticals are always a way to go. I've always kind of, colored things like, it would be great if we did this way in the future, and maybe that's coming.
Yeah, I mean, like for instance, when you're designing a boss in a plastic part, it's designed to fit a specific kind of fastener. I mean, what that information has value, right? So, who knows what might happen in the future with that sort of information you're inputting into the boss feature. So, let's see, let's get me out of trouble here. Let's see. Seth says, at the risk of asking a long question, do you have a preference between insert derive and XREF? Where does one perform better? Okay, let's see. Great question. Now, the way I want to answer that is I see it as kind of really there's a lot of overlap conceptually, but in practice, it's crystal clear to me. I only use insert XREF when I'm putting in stuff that now this is for a specific workflow. This is not for building a bottom up, inside out kind of design, right? This is my traditional use from years of using Inventor, is to consider XREF as standard components, right? So nuts, bolts, and screws, they sit in the shelf in my factory. I have his part numbers for all of them. I have a model for each of them. That way, all of my drawings will only show fasteners that I know my purchasing agents can purchase. A nice lean manufacturing model based on, a list of standard components, right? And that might also include connectors, electronics, connectors, audio connectors, all the things I used to design. Anything that was purchased could go in a library and be inserted into a design as an XREF, because I never really planned on changing those things. Now you can edit XREFs in Fusion, so there's that whole other workflow I mentioned, but that's like I consider that the major use of XREF. It's just like a read-only, something that needs to be read-only. Derive, on the other hand, it lets you, it lets you go shopping, right? You can go to another design and you can go grab just the parameters. You can go to another design and grab the whole thing. You can go there and just grab a body that you want to bring in and use as like a, maybe some kind of Boolean operation to cut things away or something like that, to make two parts join together or something like that. So it's really, derive is super powerful when it comes to that kind of thing. So if I go insert and derive, and hopefully I'll find something that's got a suitable amount of let's see if I can grab anything from the Surfer Cam project. Maybe there's some stuff in here. Let's see. So you can pick, if you're looking at my screen now, I mean, look at the stuff you can pick. I'm over here shopping in another design, going to bring some stuff in that might matter. So, I mean, I could go in and grab just a body. I can also grab parameters, and I don't know if there are any, or get some, I've never played with this from components option. It says here, all feature parameters. Okay, so parameters from components and so forth. So it's much more finely tuned. Yeah, you can grab just sketches. You can go and grab a sketch as well. So grab a body, grab a sketch, and reuse those things. So that's a huge difference, right? To be able to go in and just surgically grab one thing that you want. It's still linked, right? So if you update the source, it's all going to propagate forward. And let's see if, I don't even know if it brought over any parameters. One of the cool uses, it doesn't look like that Surfer Cam had any. So the idea of the surfboard cam, by the way, was to put a cam underneath your surfboard so you could see if there were sharks underneath you. So, and then profile recognition would ring your phone, and while you're surfing, you pick up your phone, and you're like, oh, my warning system says there's a shark underneath me. Cool. But anyway, that didn't have any parameters that came over, but you get the idea, right? There's here's that derived body. I don't even know what it was. It's just some little ball that was in design. So hopefully that helps sort of paint a picture for you there, Seth. I mean, in terms of, you know, why do one or the other. You don't always want the entire XREF. Now that's you know, that ignores a whole universe of doing things like saying, well, I want to make a new component and I want it to be external, and I want it to be, you know, one of the child components here, and then creating XREF stuff in place and doing, you know, in place editing of XREFs. That's kind of, you know, that's sort of the other side of that coin, right? You can't really do that with Derive, right? So it's kind of, one of them's kind of all or nothing, and one of them's kind of bits and pieces. I don't know. That's probably,
Sure.
I'm probably answering too much here.
No, a quick follow-up. So if I'm designing multiple parts that have to get machined and then assembled together, and everything's sort of work in progress, would you recommend going XREF or insert Derive? Like 3 components that need to get machined and bolted together. Is one way better than the other? I've been using them interchangeably, and I don't know if that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's, so you're kind of working in a way that, like, I'm unfamiliar with, right? Where you just need to combine some things for a workflow process rather than for like the design of a great big assembly. It's, you know, I don't know. I've often, and this is just me speaking from the hip here. Like if somebody's doing, like one of our customers here in town does a lot of panels, right? And so they have to get all these things that look like video game consoles, the classical big giant video game consoles. And so they're using common plywood or MDF material, and they will go in and derive from the assembly that the designers are making. They'll go in and pull all the panels into a new file using Derive in order to put them flat and nest them and machine them on their 2.5 axis router. So for them, that makes perfect sense that they're deriving right there. If they were to use XREF, what they would wind up with is the whole assembly would come in, and it would just be this thing that have to, you know, break the link and break it up. Whereas by using Derive, they can get just the panel bodies themselves and create a cut job, right? Is that a little closer to what you're thinking?
Absolutely, thank you. That answers it.
Yep. There's another example. I should have had my school projects open, where I show Derive as a way of managing model states. So if you have a casting that, you know, the casting itself is a part number, then you machine the casting so that becomes a new part, right? The raw material for that machined casting is the casting. So it's, if you looked in the bill of materials, it would say you take one of this part A, make it A sub 1, and then if you take it and maybe even add more finishing later, like you paint it or, you know, mask areas off and paint the thing, then it becomes perhaps another part number, or it gets a, you know, A sub 1.1 or something like that. All right, we got it. Chris has his cat. I wish one of my cats was in here. I got the door shut. So Derive, you know, can sort of show the process of, you know, raw materials all the way through to finished part. And if the casting is the source of all of that, right? So if the casting has to change length because it's some kind of crank or something that needs to get it 10 millimeters longer, then of course all of those processes downstream from that would update. So Derive's really powerful for showing model states. Maybe that's probably, I'm sure the model state people would cringe if they heard me saying that. I'm probably using it wrong, but that's the way I think of it. All right.
Feels like Steven's got another one.
Yeah, let's see. In the middle of trying out the organic mesh conversion option that comes with product design extension, attempting to convert a scanned mesh with 2.6 million faces. Yep. Yeah, that's trying to make it do it in one go seemed like a bridge too far. And I'm going to say, yeah, there are some limitations in Fusion when it comes to just anything. And I think you would find this in any CAD program, really. I mean, 2.6 million faces is nothing to a mesh modeling program, because that mesh modeling program isn't looking at every one of those faces and keeping track of, well, where's my cutting tool going to go when it gets here, right? The surface quality in Fusion is a couple of orders of magnitude more precise than what mesh modelers are built to do. And as a result of it, every time, you do something like move the scene around, right? Even then, like imagine 2.6 million triangles right now swirling around on the screen, and the graphics card is keeping track of where every single one of them is. And every one of them has 3 edges, right? That's, I'm going to use the word zillions here, right? You get up into zillions really quick. And the main problem with Fusion is that, like most CAD programs, all the compute happens on the main UI thread. So you're not going to get away from that with other CAD programs, right? Even Inventor suffers from it. So, or SolidWorks or others, right? Parametric CAD that's really precise for manufacturing and mesh are just kind of 2 different worlds. Right, so you're making the best of it. Now, that said, we have performance initiatives and things that we're working on, and this would be the kind of thing that how do we work with 2.6 million faces and do it in a way that maybe there's some ways we could make it more efficient, or even multi-thread certain small operations, and that might be one of them. I don't know for sure that they're working on anything specific like that, but I would imagine they're keen to improve performance and mesh at any time. So, I am particularly interested in performance as well. So if there's, and I want to put my email address here in the chat. Send me anything you think is a performance case, and I'll get it put into the system and let the performance people chew on it. Hopefully they could find some insights.
And I just put a 2 billion point scan model that I can't open in anything in your email.
Sure. You might get a message back that says, "I'm sorry, but this is out of scope."
I mean, but to the point here, before even Fusion had that importing the scan geometry, every product out there, it is I used to do a lot of reality capture stuff and was on the reality capture team in the CTO.
That's right.
And I would always get people like, well, how about we just scan this motorcycle tank? It should be easy to go into Inventor or Fusion or anything, or AutoCAD. And it's like, no, it's tessellated. It's got all these points, and CAD being what it is, it wants to know the details. Whereas something like Max would be like, hey, it looks cool. It's just looking at the surface. Whereas the CAD is like OCD, looking at all the constraints. And then a lot of scan data, how it stitches, to a mesh, isn't really optimum. And it's not what normal CAD software would see, these abrupt, little edges and little dangly things hanging off. And CAD just follows that, just gets confused at times. So the fact that we're pulling this in is nice. I mean, we pulled a BMW car, the motor and the front end about 4 years ago into Fusion, and that highlighted a lot of those issues too. And it's come a long way. So hopefully we get better.
Yeah, I mean, one of my students had a scan of he does auto aftermarket stuff. And so he showed me he had a scan of a Ford Bronco. And he was, it converted, it was messy, but it turned into a surface body and full on B-rep surface of, the sort of ghosty most of a front end. And he just needed to make stuff that attached to the bumper. And, in a limited case like that, I mean, that absolutely works, but he's not going to ever make anything in that mesh, right? He's going to model things that interface with the mesh, and he's got a pretty good, plus or minus a few millimeters, because that's all you really need when you're making automotive bolt-on, junk for the front of a 4x4. It suited him, right? That level of precision was just fine, and you couldn't do it without the scanned Ford Bronco front end, but didn't really need to make anything. there just as a reference. So I find that that's, I think, the best use of mesh.
Yeah, and I'll also point out that the tools that actually can rationalize, scan data, and figure out, like, it's like the world's biggest connect the dots, right? It's like a whole bunch of mosquitoes or bugs, and you've got to figure out, is that a curve? How does that transition go? Because there may be points that are errant. And so what we call those is analytical, surface reconstruction tools. And I will tell you, those tools, in my past history, they are over $25,000 a seat.
Yeah.
And what they do is they look at two places and they go, oh, it follows this and creates the proper curves. But that's high-end analytical geometry. And maybe with machine learning and things like that, they'll afford us that power inside of Fusion or other products of ours. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think all of this is a long path. I mean, that's it's one of the things that's really exciting about working on Fusion. As when I started on it, it was the form workspace was a separate product, and there was no timeline, and I've just seen it grow from so little to so much, and yet the funnel is ever widening, right? What's possible is there's no end in it. I don't see it diminishing at all. It's the possibilities just unlock every day.
Yeah.
So, let us know your pain points, for sure. I mean, that's the business I'm in, is getting that stuff addressed. Send in your crash reports. I'm also the QA that looks at the most crash reports, although I'm trying to train up my brethren and sisterin, I guess, to also to also do more work with crashes. We want to make Fusion more stable and so forth. So those are the things that I think on a day-to-day basis are going to make your life the best. And but if you don't like the way a certain, why isn't there an object to join, right? That's a great question. Always let us know.
Yeah. I mean, days of building all new equipment, that's kind of saturated, but modifying existing for new parts. We did a lot of work. So Jay Leno's shop is an Inventor and Fusion 360 user. And so they've got 1916 cars and these crazy steam engine things from the 1800s. And so they'll scan stuff and they'll use that reference geometry to make a part or to make better parts, with modern knowledge of that. So I think that's a huge thing. We'll see more and more of that.
I think that'd be great one day to see someone actually break the scanning to CAD bubble. Like just do it. It seems it's almost like it's like you're looking at stuff this way, and where's the one that's looking at the part with a clear lens and it comes up with a theoretically perfect surface that's not a bunch of triangles, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a LiDAR right here in my hand now. It's a phone. And I can scan a mesh using, the pro models of the iPhone, the last two releases. I can scan a reasonable mesh, and bring that into Fusion or something like that. It's not the prettiest and it's not that analytical perfect geometry, but if I wanted to do something for my arm, something to fit on it, maybe I want to, come up with some cool gadget, I could probably model that based off of a scan that I do of my arm and then, design it in Fusion and 3D print it.
Yep.
It's easy to think, why don't we have this and why don't we have that? But then look back 10 or 15 years.
Yeah. I mean, I still remember one of the first Fusion classes I was teaching. So I'd been working on Fusion for 5 or 6 years already. And I convinced the college to let me teach an experimental class. And I got this engineer who was a retired engineer, mechanical engineer, and who was doing jobs for people. And he thought Fusion would be the way to go. Ended up, he asked me a bunch of questions about how to avoid the cloud, right? How do I save the files locally? How do I open them locally? And I told them the ways. It's not a secret. You can use Fusion like a desktop traditional terrestrial CAD product if you want. It's a pain, but it works the same way. Local save, local open. You lose all the magic of the cloud. And he argued with me a bit about it. And then about a year after he was in my class, he writes me this heartfelt message telling me thanks for teaching him about the cloud. He had been in San Francisco. His car was broken into, his backpack was stolen, his laptop was gone, and he had just had gotten really far with a couple of big projects that were going to pay his bills for the next year. And he ran to the hotel, little, the business center, got on their computer, logged into his Fusion account, and saw all of his data was still there. And he said he was in tears. And he said, "Thank you, Phil, for teaching me about the cloud and how it works." So from 10 years of using Inventor in a networked environment to saving somebody's essentially his livelihood, because I convinced him that, look, just believe in this. This is new technology. It's gonna seem weird, but it's really, it's like this. I gave him lots of examples. It led him along the path, and that's powerful. And where does it go from here? I mean, it's not like we're stopping. There's no end to the innovation that you can bring to CAD, at least that I can see. So anyway, I'm bullish, if you couldn't tell. All right. Any other thoughts or questions?
Just going back to that mesh conversion, it's fascinating seeing the mesh conversion from triangles to quad through to a T-spline body. That's been fascinating to see.
Yeah, that's a pretty good path too, right? Because the quad mesh stuff, the OBJ has to obey slightly more sane rules, when it comes to geometry anyway. You're getting so much closer to analytic geometry that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's and you can go edit it too. That's the other fun part.
Yeah, that 2.6 million triangle mesh is a scanned automotive part that I'm looking to see if I can reverse engineer back into a proper B-rep, smooth surface through lofting and doing it properly rather than just converting the mesh.
Yeah, I think, so have you tried the mesh tools where it's like do a mesh section sketch and, where you can kind of pull in, little slices of it in order to do your modeling? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way to do it. I mean, it's kind of like a canvas, right? When you use a modeling canvas, it's only pixel perfect, right? It's not there to be, so perfect that you can manufacture off of it, but it's certainly going to help you guide you along the way. So
that's a great point, Phil. I mean, the more that we transmit or we change the data that came in from points, the further we are away from reality, right?
Yep.
And so you need to keep that in mind. How many iterations do you want to do, or do you just want to refer to that original geometry or point? A couple key points. I'll tell you, scans. I've seen people do HVAC of buildings, and one was at airport. I won't mention which one, but I remember somebody showed me their BIM model where they had scanned geometry and of existing HVAC, and I go, that's interesting. There's 40-foot spans. There's not any sag or any dents. And they said, no, we cleaned it up. And I said, well, then what was the point? Because now all of a sudden, any of their interferences don't really matter because it's not true to what was there. So it's what is your intent when you capture something?
Yep. So Stephen, I got to ask you, that's a Clash poster framed on your wall behind you there?
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, it's the album.
Okay.
The first album.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like Paul leaning back with the bass on him.
Yeah.
Okay. Just checking. That's class.
No, thanks.
You had me for a minute. Clash. I'm like, oh, what is he printing pictures of models clashing?
Talking about the group, the musical group.
Good stuff.
Not the interference tool.
Well, maybe that's what put me on the road to manufacturing. Who knows? In a roundabout way, the universe works that way, I'm sure. All right. So Kevin, Michael, haven't heard from you, either of you. Not to put you on the spot, just wanted to say hello, see if there's anything on your mind. Okay,
That would be a no.
that's all right. That's totally fine. Glad you're here anyhow. So, all right. Well, trying to think of anything else that's fresh on my mind about Fusion. Of course, the rest of the what's new is all the stuff that I don't know much about, like electronics and generative design and stuff like that. Scrolling through it.
By the way, we do have a monthly series of community conversations featuring the Fusion Electronics team of Jorge and Richard. So if any of you are interested in electronics, check out the community conversations calendar and join our next session. Oh, he just put it up on the chat for you, so you can take a look at when the next one's going to be. I believe it's around April 23rd or something like that. Just from memory.
Yeah, and we're adding new ones all the time. And, at the end of this session, there'll be a survey, and just put that in there, if you'd like to see Phil, and we'll try and twist his arm, but, build this out to a monthly or every other month kind of an event. I think it would be beneficial. I think Stephen would agree.
Yeah. If it just occurred to me too that we scheduled this around the release time too. So if we did sort of a what's new in the latest release conversation, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I could at least speak to the modeling and documentation side of everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we could get guests if we need to explain more. So yeah, whatever you think would be some good content and what you'd want to hear from. So.
It looks like Michael's asking me a question.
Sorry, go on.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, Philip, I was just going to say, is there a good reason why the improvements to the drawings workspace, it seems so drawn out compared with, so many other features seem to come on leaps and bounds, but improving drawings seems to be quite a slow process.
Well, I see in every release that they're adding things. I mean, they just added whole tables and some other I think coming soon, this is probably in public, they're going to be adding auxiliary views and things like that. So the table stakes for drawings is getting completely filled out. It depends on, I guess, on what you're after. Right. There's certain key things about drawings that I think need to change. And I don't know that there's movement on those. They're really just busy adding features right now. But like, I can't make a drawing of this design and this design. Let's say that I have multiple designs that I combine together to do something, and I want to put them in one drawing. I have to then build an assembly with those things in it, even though they don't necessarily even touch each other. Right. So, that to me feels like, as a, 20-something year user of AutoCAD, I'm like, this seems rudimentary, right? And Inventor can even do that all you want, right? Yeah. So things like that feel really out of place. But on the other hand, they are adding, features, in every release, right? So one of the things that happened was that there was actually a sort of a hiatus that ended a couple of years ago. Where drawings had just didn't have as many resources dedicated to development for a good number of years after we sort of entered with a baseline experience. So it kind of helps to understand that, like, development of Fusion is global. There's teams all over the place that have very specific functions, right? So when people say, hey, you added this thing, how come you didn't fix my favorite thing? And it's like, those are two different people. You don't go to your auto mechanic and you're yelling at the guy that's working on your tires about why he hasn't fixed your radio, and he's like, I don't know radios, I know tires, right? And so that's so that said, it's been since we kind of reinvested in drawings, it's been 2 solid years of progress, and they're still growing the teams, right? So there's they're adding more developers, they're adding more QA. I know that for sure, because those are my people. And there's no plans of slowing down, right? So in terms of what their roadmap is, I'm confident, and I think maybe just keep your eye on it, and I don't know exactly how to give us the best feedback in terms of what you want to see in drawings and stuff, but maybe do you have any examples?
No, I just see people. One of the things I am, as well as using Fusion as a user, in terms of designing things, I'm a certified instructor. So I do get out in front of people teaching Fusion.
Yeah.
And I get some people complaining that the drawings workspace isn't the equivalent of the Inventor in workspace for drawings.
Yeah, it's one of the things we specifically did not consume from Inventor. So Inventor also specifically did not consume AutoCAD when it built its drawings workspace. They went on their own way, and they've had 20 years to work on it, right? So what you're seeing in Fusion is basically compartmentalized AutoCAD. So that's why when you launch a drawing, it takes forever to load up, because you're loading up giant chunks of what would be AutoCAD.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, that's what's running in the background there. So that gives that hopefully gives you an idea of like the way the grip boxes work and things like that, if you're ever used to AutoCAD at all. But yeah, it's very much it's AutoCAD paper space, right? So if you want to let's get further into the weeds here, it is not model space AutoCAD, it's paper space AutoCAD. It is the easiest way to describe it. It's not perfectly one-to-one, but that's basically what you're looking at. Yeah, it's I'll admit, yeah, it does have a long way to go. I think that they're investing in the right areas. I think they're adding stuff as fast as they can. Completeness, at some point, feature completeness will start to creep up, and they'll start looking at spending more of their resources on things like getting rid of sort of friction points and things like that as well. So
Phil?
Yeah.
We have Michael asked a question about UI, the CAM UI, I guess it would be.
Let's see, maybe.
And then we can wrap it up. We are coming up on time.
Do you have discussion about UI at CAM? So what's I don't have a lot of opinions about it, other than it's a little different because the CAM teams have had leeway to kind of get outside of some of the design patterns of the UI. But what is it about the CAM UI, Michael? You're
muted.
Muted.
Mute. Okay. Excuse me, I'm not original English speaking, so it's a problem for me. I am good in reading, maybe with translation. I on the OTX, I listen maybe in the second lesson, there was that Autodesk is planning for UI for generate NC code and for drawings too. You know about this, how they are far from this idea, I think.
That's unfortunately it's something I don't know about.
Okay.
I do recall that NC programs were added a few months back, but I don't know what they would be planning to do for the UI there.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I can't speak to it at all with any kind of honesty.
What we have in the UI for the NC programs is what it's going to be. I don't believe there's any further changes coming in. And the reason that the UI was changed for the NC program was because we had a bit of disparity between what we experienced with Macintosh, or Mac, sorry, Mac and PC. We had very different experiences there. And so the goal was to merge them into one cohesive experience in the UI. So what you have in the UI for NC programs is going to be what is going forward. There is still some disparity between all the toolpath dialogues. If you look on the PC of the toolpath dialogue, it's very blocky. You go to Mac and it's like, this is a nice UI. And there is an ongoing effort to merge those two into one cohesion. So hopefully that helped.
Thanks, Seth.
Yeah, that was good.
All right.
Do you want to go into the closing session here. Let me share my screen once again with everybody. All right, can everybody see that? Yes?
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank
Yes.
everybody for coming today. Thanks to Phil, thanks to Seth for his input on those questions. Like Sean mentioned earlier, there will be a survey going out. We would love to hear your thoughts and ideas, how we're doing, what we could do better, what kind of things would you like to see in these conversations going forward. So when you see the survey, please take a few minutes and fill that out. If you would like to be a conversation speaker, or if you have an idea for a topic that you'd like to see us cover, we'd like to hear from you about that as well. Please reach out to Sean. His email is right here on this slide, and he's putting, what did you put in the chat there? The proposal link. Okay, so there is a proposal form that if you have an idea for a session that you would like to host, you can fill a proposal form out and we will take a look at it. We also would like to see you in the community. There's so many different resources and things that we can that you can visit nowadays. We also obviously have our forums. We have our new community groups. We have our Community Voices blog, which is a blog by the community for the community. This is actually members of the community sharing their thoughts and ideas, workflows, tips and tricks, or sometimes even just interesting stories with the community. We have our new community journal blog, which is a blog by the community team for you with news and information, member spotlights, upcoming programs, just any kind of interesting industry information that we run across. So you can check that out and follow along on that. That is another great new resource. Check out our student group hub. And also don't forget to check out the community conversations and keep up on what new sessions we're putting on that calendar. With that, I would like to say thank you to everyone. Thanks, Sean.
All right.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Phil.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime. I hope we get to do this again.
I do too.
Yeah, I think this was a good one.
Right on.
All right.